stop off on the road and look around because, one farmer is going to notify the other one, hey, somebody's on your land.
I had discovered already by some overlooked books that I found in the library that Bray Road at one time was a Native American trail that led out to some other area lakes that would have been great summer places.
Bray Road. Bray Road. We're talking Bray Road tonight, folks, and I'm very excited. Welcome back to STM Live. My name is Aaron. I am still your host, somehow. Tonight is going to be a very Werewolf Dogman-centric evening, and that goes for the announcements as well. Even the announcements are on theme tonight. Please be sure to check out the Skinwalkers, American Werewolves 2. It is actually available on Prime Video, Apple TV, and Vudu now. We got word that it was available on Vudu a few days ago. Excuse me. After you've seen the film, be sure to leave a review. That helps other people to find it. It gets the almighty algorithm going and tells other people, hey, you should check out American Werewolves 2, The Skinwalkers. Great film. One of my personal favorites presently. So definitely check that out. You can also, I'm so excited about this. Monster Fest. Monster Fest is coming June 28th and 29th, downtown Canton, Ohio, at the Doubletree by Hilton and Canton Palace Theater. We do still have a few VIP tickets available, which gets you exclusive event merch, gets you early access to the convention hall. We can't wait to see you guys there. So head over to stmmonsterfest.com and get your tickets, because if you do that, you can come see me in person and you can get your copy of Hunting Grounds, Dogmen of the Lakes, signed by me if you want to. Pre-orders for the book are presently available at shop.smalltownmonsters.com, and the book will be out next week on the 23rd. I'm pretty stoked about that. Speaking of books that I wrote, I didn't mean to do it this way, but tonight we are giving away the very last available hardcover copy of the Texas Dogman Triangle, which was a part of last year's Kickstarter. So about halfway through the evening, I've actually set a reminder on my watch. I'm going to ask a trivia question. Whoever gets the answer first, we're going to mail you this book. Not this book. This one's mine. You can't have it. Courtney's going to send you one from Ohio. So shout out to Courtney. But yeah, definitely stick around for that. I don't even have extra hard copies. They don't exist. So just saying, check it out. A shout out to everybody in the audience tonight. I'm seeing squad members, old and new. Shout out to our newest squad member, Katie Mack. Welcome, Katie. Thank you for signing up. I see Vincent is here. Great to see Vincent. Our dude Michael is here. My new buddy Nick is in the house. All kinds of cool folks. J.E. Roberts is here. Good to see you. Joe is here. They're my buddies from the West Coast Dogman Project. You guys picked a great night to tune in. I think you're going to appreciate tonight's conversation. So without further ado, let's welcome tonight's guest. He's a cool guy. He is a director, filmmaker, researcher. You may know him as the director of Werewolves Unearthed, another film in the STM Dogman universe, which I'm sure many of you have already seen. Please welcome Mr. Ward Hiney. How are you, brother?
Good, man. How are you doing, Aaron?
I'm fantastic. Thanks for making time for me, dude. I know you got a crazy schedule with work and everything, and travel. You're traveling a lot these days. So.
Yeah, I just got back from Austin. We unfortunately missed out on an opportunity to go hunt some Dogman down there. But
yeah, we tried for like 3 days to link up, but we'll get there. So just really briefly, for anybody who may not have seen you on the show before, this is a returning appearance to STM Live. Who are you?
My name is Ward Hiney. I direct and create documentary films about high strangeness. Particularly, I like to think of the thing I do as experiential adventure films. So we go on an adventure and the audience comes along with us. I think that's kind of my niche and what I'm good at and what I like to do. So I started out doing a paranormal docuseries called Dark Holler. And then it sort of spiraled out into, I've done some stuff with Tony Merkel and the Merkel Media guys and Confessionals. And last year got the opportunity to go to Pennsylvania and shoot Werewolves Unearthed for Seth and crew. So yeah, it's been a wild ride since sort of being red-pilled into the weirdness a couple years ago. So
yeah. I think you were the maybe second guest I had on this show after I started doing it back in August of last year. Yeah. second or third. It was very early on, so it's cool to have you back. You're also, I don't think this is spoiling too much, but you're mentioned in here a couple times. So
Am I? What?
yeah, you're in there.
Oh, now I gotta go. I just pulled up shop at .smalltownmonsters.com to go get a copy. So definitely have to now.
You can do that. Yeah. I like to talk about, who's doing things in the field, in addition to talking about the phenomena itself. But again, don't want to get too much into spoilers. What was the first question I was going to ask you? Oh, okay. So this is important, and this is something that a lot of people have opinions on, and I think you and I have talked about this a little bit previously, but why don't we go ahead and just establish kind of the separation of terms tonight? Do you prefer the term dogman or werewolf? Do you use them interchangeably? I use them interchangeably. I'll just say that from the jump. Like I always use both, but where do you stand on that?
Yeah, I mean it's a bit of it's an equivocal, like a language thing. So werewolf is literally in German man wolf. It's not that far removed from saying dog man. I know that there are people with it's interesting in any of these high strangeness or paranormal categories, cryptids, people become very attached and their egos get very into being an quote unquote expert. And I don't think that such a thing really exists. And so I know that it's a bit of a thing for dogman to be regarded as a possible like undiscovered canid species that happens to walk upright. I don't think I don't see much evidence for that. So I think that the distinction is a little silly. I mean, we're playing with language. It means the same thing.
Yeah, I'm with you there. And I see why people make that distinction, because the idea of the werewolf is so deeply built into what we think about pop culture and movies and video games now. It's everywhere. Versus this dogman thing, which we've only been talking about, more recently, and is still like, we're still kind of in the infancy of the dogman research era. And our friends from the West Coast Dogman Project, no experts in this field. I agree with you. Yeah. Ask me why I don't spend time on Reddit's Dogman page. Like, yeah, I can't do it. But yeah, I'm with you on that. And this is not to, if anyone listening right now is screaming at their computer screen, you're wrong. They're different things. Hey, there's room to make that argument too. We're not here to tell anybody you're wrong. But for the context of our conversation tonight, I feel it's important to establish that terminology.
Yeah, well, look at it. I would say, look at it like this. I think that this is endemic of sort of a generational thing that we do nowadays. That's, you could call it chronological arrogance. The idea that the ideas that we have most recently, those are the really valuable ones. And everything prior to this generation, those people were likely idiots who had no idea what they were dealing with. But if we take this is why I think that the experiential lens is the one to use in examining these things. If we take the experience of seeing an upright, apparent, dog man, werewolf, if we take that experience and we apply the wisdom that we have of the ages to it, like, where does this phenomena happen? What has been said about it for as long as we've had recorded human history? I think that's a much more interesting case than just saying, well, because we're in the in the Enlightenment age, in the age of scientism and reason and material, there must be this material undiscovered canid creature, when there is so little evidence that one would expect of that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So that's my position.
Let's talk a little more about the evidentiary aspects, because you mentioned it. And we did have a great comment from Captain Zoom, who's joining us for the first time tonight. Welcome, Captain Zoom, but need a specimen. Yeah, that's kind of the critical piece of evidence. In any cryptozoological study, that's what we're missing. But, you mentioned that there seems to be an absence of evidence that points towards that biological specimen. Can you talk a little more about that? Oh, but real quick, Hellbent Holler is in the house. Jesse and Joe. Hey, guys. Good to see you. They're also in here. Sorry, I might do that more tonight as it comes up. But Yeah, let's talk about the body of evidence as it exists or doesn't exist with regard to this phenomenon.
Yeah. Well, I think, I mean, there are a ton of claimed video or image captures, many of which they're all really, really subjective and subject to a lot of pareidolia. Um, I think that probably what I would say about the evidence and the needing a specimen, what we do have a lot of specimens of is evidence of shamanic rituals involving donning the attire, donning the skins and heads and skulls of wolves and other creatures in an attempt to apparently shapeshift. Like we do have evidence of that.
Mhm.
And if let's see, I actually had an article pulled up here. This is from Werewolf Shamans in the Ancient Woodlands of the Eastern United States. It's an article by William Romaine. The abstract itself is pretty interesting, and I can put, if there's somewhere I can put links or something, I can put links to this. But
Yeah, if you see the live chat field
oh,
on
okay,
your
here
screen,
we
you
go.
can drop it there. Then everybody should be able to see it. I think I know the article you're talking about. I might have
Yep.
referenced it during a recent book
Oh, okay.
writing.
Well, yeah. So then you'll be familiar with this. But we do have things like one of the images in this article. It records a figurine. Um, let's see. Figurine shows a Hopewell. So the Hopewell, the Adena, the mound builders are all sort of names for this mound building civilization that we don't know anything else about. Those are not names that they gave themselves. They are names that we gave them based on where we discovered the remnants of them. But the figurine, this one in particular, dates from like 200 BC to 8500 in the Eastern Woodlands. The sculpture is known as the Ray figurine. It was discovered with a human skeleton in a mound at the Newark Earthworks in Licking County, Ohio, which is a very strange place with lots of odd stuff related to it in the first place. But that's an aside. I continue the article. The transformative aspect of the figurine is found in the different perspectives presented by the piece. So the sculpture fits neatly in the palm of your hand, and the size and shape of it facilitates the viewer's manipulation of the figure. So you can like rotate it in your hand, and it appears differently as you rotate it. And there's different perspectives. In one of them, you can see the like a shaman's head, like this, if you will. He's got a bear head and a bear skin on. And from one side, you can see that it's a shaman in a bear suit. But if you turn it around, right, like this, it just appears to be a bear scratching its head. And I'm not
Mhm.
suggesting that that's what people are seeing. I am suggesting that someone taking the time to put that much intention and care into drawing a figurine of this that has that particular perspective shift does suggest that they're trying to communicate something.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
given all of the other data we have from multiple disparate cultures about shape-shifting, shamanic rituals becoming animal-like, I think what most comports with the historical narrative surrounding these things is that um, there are ritual ways to cause the perception of someone that sees you when you're in this ritual, when you're in this state, to be modified in such a way that you are perceived as that kind of beast.
Interesting.
So I think, and that's in different cultures, and you can see it's a very short step from that to the werewolf idea of a human actually transforming into this thing in a like physical transmogrification sort of way, bones,
Mhm.
disjoint, all that. Um, you know, a lot of those things might very well be the way that the witness is perceiving what's happening.
Mhm.
Um, and so I think that's a compelling idea for me. One, because uh, I've seen stuff involving ritual magic have an actual effect. Um, and I've seen um, like I've seen things that and heard from many people that I'm not willing to say are lying. I think they're telling the truth about their perception of an event.
Mhm.
Um, And so I don't know. That seems to make the most sense to me at this point in my exploration of the subject, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense. And the arguments, when you look at a body of reports, like say you pick out 50 from various sources, they kind of seem to slot into two categories. You have a lot that are very spectral, run kind of on the dark side of things. They're a lot more inexplicable. There's things that don't make sense, like, seeing the thing change shape, or the presence of an odd mist or fog that seems to come up a lot, these feelings of fear and foreboding. And then you have some that seem to look like encounters with just regular animals. But it seems like the more I look at it, the fewer I find in the second category. Like, I'm talking to more witnesses who are left unsettled by these things and feel, shaken by it afterward. The word evil is used a lot. And I think that's a term that human beings kind of blanket to things we don't understand and that scare us, but it's like a defense mechanism. It's like something in our brains is kicking in going, this is bad. This is a threat. You need to get out of here. So it's interesting, but the case for them being animals, like, in a lot of ways, it just comes down to the location. So many of these things show up in the woods, near bodies of water, near food sources, but then we rarely seem to see them drinking water or, eating wild game. We do have the roadkill encounters. I'm sure you've heard plenty of those where it's eating roadkill on the side of the road. But beyond that, you don't hear them engaging in natural animal behaviors as much. And I feel like I had a question I was going to turn that into, but
Yeah. Well, I think, this is another thing that over the last couple of years, I've come to have a radically different view of reality than I did prior. And one of the ways that it's different is that I used to conceive of, it seems like we speak about, the physical realm and the spiritual realm as two divorced categories, as two things that are entirely separate. Or we think of, if you prefer the terminology of like dimensions, interdimensionality, we think of one dimension being entirely separate from another. I'll just stick with the language of spiritual because I think that's my tradition. I don't think they're as divorced as we tend to conceive of them. I think that there's an overlap that is constant, and it makes more sense to think of them, rather than different realms, to think of them as the seen and the unseen part of the realm that we all participate in, that we all walk around and live and move, the one we're familiar with.
It's an interesting idea, like trying, and it's kind of a difficult concept when you're trying to wrap your brain around it. I can go, okay, this is like a ghost monster, fine. Or I can go, okay, this is just a weird dog, but it's hard to find space in the middle, But again, this phenomena is so bizarre and so strange. That's where it seems to push a lot of researchers that I've talked to, is, it seems to be something different, something that's more difficult to define. But I don't know, man. A couple of cool questions from the audience, some fun comments. Johnny Mariner says, almost everywhere in the USA call them dogmen. That's a really interesting point, is that we hear about this phenomena being in the US a lot. Obviously us as people who are researching it in the United States, that's going to come up. But I'm noticing more and more that it's not just limited to the United States. We're starting to see reports from other areas. And in fact, there have been some for quite some time, it seems like. Have you run into any of that in your research? Are you seeing it more internationally, or?
I don't know about recent or like modern examples. However, I do think it's interesting the number of dogman, like the amount of dogman interest that increases and then seems to correlate with more dogman sightings.
Yeah.
And you could say, I mean, the cynical view of that would be that, people are trying to capitalize on the popular paranormal subject at the moment. And I'm sure there is some of that. But the other interesting part of that is to think about, I don't know how familiar you are with the idea of a tulpa or a thought form. But the more sort of attention, it seems like, and I've seen this in at least one other thing that I'm pretty confident was that the more sort of attention and focus is brought by a larger group of people onto an idea, it's psychologically true that the more they kind of look for it in the pattern of their lives. But it's also true, I think, that that thing actually starts to be the thing that is encountered for some reason. And there's like a body of philosophical and epistemological work done that is right at the outside edge of my even ability to comprehend it, by a lady named Esther Meek, who is she's a philosopher and epistemologist. But she talks about the interesting bit about that is I described as best my limited brain could her view of reality as being relational. So you sort of extend your care and your focus out into reality to learn a thing, to come to know a thing. And reality rewards you when you make contact with that thing by giving you the knowledge that you were seeking. And sometimes it surprises you and you find something you didn't know you were looking for. But that idea of reality and coming to know as a relational thing is something that I shared with, there was a guy who was working on a film set who was indigenous, and he was like, that's interesting that you would put it that way. That's exactly how we view learning and reality and coming to know. We view reality as a relational thing. Rather than like an observational thing, right? Rather than like I am divorced from the reality, looking at it through a microscope and figuring out what's there without affecting it at all. Relational is different. It's the way you get to know a person, right? You ask questions, you, to a certain extent, you submit yourself to becoming like that person or meeting them where they are in some way. And then you find the thing that you were looking for in that person. And reality is like that, I think. So I say all that to say, the increase in sightings and stuff, I think, is explicable either in terms of like in the paranormal terms of tulpa or thought form, possibly in the epistemological terms of like as we extend our care out into reality to try to find that thing, it starts to show up more.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, it's a fascinating concept too, because you kind of have to ask, why this? You know, why this shape? Why this form? Why have we been talking about this for so long? And that theory is really interesting, especially if we're talking about an uptick in recent sightings. You know, if this is something we're projecting out into the world and now more of us are interested in it, that's such a fascinating concept. And I love that idea. And I think, you know, and this is just something I've kind of recently started to speculate on, but I think it might also say something about humankind's relationship with canines and our development as a species, because those are so intertwined, you know.
Yeah.
That's something I've just recently really started to like ideate on. So I don't know.
That's an interesting thought too.
Get there someday.
Yeah, it is a uniquely I don't know, it's a unique thing. Like if you see a genuinely wild dog, like I've never encountered a wolf in the woods, but I have encountered coyotes that like didn't know I was there. And yeah, I don't know. There is something about the canine form that is uniquely captivating, I guess.
Yeah. Just like the way we look at wolves and dogs, and why do we identify with them? I don't know. This is kind of a little bit of what we were talking about just a moment ago, but Harvest Mary Moon asks, if no one can get a specimen, is it paranormal? That's an interesting question. You know, maybe there's not a physical body to take a specimen of. I don't know. How does this stuff work? But then we have reports where they interact with the environment. They leave tracks. I heard it rustling the trees, you know. That's tough.
Yeah. I think I mean, as far as the specimens, if it is what I postulated it was earlier, this like ritual shamanic thing that affects the perception of the person that witnesses it, I think we do have specimens of that. Like in that same article that I linked, I think I sent it in the private chat. I don't know if anybody can see that or not, but
I posted a link in the live chat as well. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
So definitely check that out, guys. Yeah,
in that same article, it's like page 5 here, 4 or 5. They're documenting finds from various mounds that incorporate what appears to be like a they call it a wolf maxillary. So that's like the top half of the jaw snout
Mhm.
attached, and it's like a bone handle attached to that, right? So they just carve off the top of the skull, and they found it buried like in the mouth of shamans, in the mouth of the wise men or whatever. And then presumably they find leather over top of it. So the idea is it's probably part of the wolf head that's mounted onto this jaw piece that is in the mouth. So it would look like a person wearing a wolf skin with an actual snout attached and teeth that can open and move as he talks. So I think if no one can get a specimen, is it paranormal? Uh, I think we have specimens of it being paranormal, and a particular kind of paranormal, the ritual magic kind.
Interesting. Because again, if we talk about the shamanic aspect of it, that's another thing that is around the world and throughout history. Like we have shamanic shapeshifters in South America. They were talked about on a recent podcast produced by Small Town Monsters called House of Monsters. They are in Asia. We have the Buddha from over there. Those are just the two that I thought of off the top of my head. So this is a recurring motif throughout human history and throughout different cultures. But and it's not always dogs either. There are transforming into bears, jaguars, owls, all kinds of different stuff. But this whole idea of humankind intercepting with and taking on the form of animals, it's recurring. We see it everywhere. So
Yeah.
and again, I didn't have an ending to that, but
No, yeah. I mean, if you look at, I think I've made this point many times in other places, but if you look at temple guardians, guardians of sacred space throughout multiple world cultures, they're very frequently, if not always, chimeric creatures. It's a man lion, it's a man dragon, whatever the chimera is. And I think that imagery is shared across all of these disparate cultures for a reason. And I would say that, coming from my faith tradition, I would say that that's because in reality, the guardians of sacred space are chimeric, cherubic, angelic beings. And so the pattern of having a cherub or having a chimeric being guard your sacred space is through all of these cultures, because that is the nature of reality. That's part of the unseen reality. So when the imagery of the chimera, of the animal man picture is, I mean, itself is symbolically a call to something that is shared in all of these cultures' perceptions of the unseen world, I guess.
Mm. Speaking of kind of along that line, we have a question from Aaron Sleeper, one of our squad members. Thank you for supporting the channel tonight, Aaron. But he asks, have you ever read any of the late Dr. Michael Heiser's books, particularly The Unseen Realm? He is a Christian theologian. I've heard of this book, but I've never read it.
Yeah, I've read it and most of the rest of his body of work. And yeah, Dr. Heiser was one of, maybe, if I had to pick like 5 things that were my kind of red pilling on the way that the world is, he's in that top 5. So
Wow.
yeah, that book is really good, and it's very helpful in if all of the stuff that I just said about chimeric guardians of sacred space doesn't make any sense. You're like, that's insane and doesn't make any sense. Heiser's book, The Unseen Realm, is like the more academic version, and I think Supernatural is the more lay level version. So if you're going to start with one, Supernatural is the one to start with. But yeah,
Okay.
love Heiser.
Very cool. I like a good book recommendation. Can always do that. Let's see. Here's a question, again, kind of on the same lines that we've been talking. Johnny Mariner asks, do you consider skinwalkers a dogman? A skinwalker is a pretty specific term, talking about some of the indigenous tribes in North America. So, what's your take on that?
Yeah, I think it's all part of the same phenomenon. I think the skinwalkers are, a particular coming out of the Navajo and a few cultures around them, are a particular sort of subset. I think that okay, so I think that the way that
Here we go.
the way that magic works, and this is almost verbatim a thing that a Ute, half Lakota man told me while we were outside of Skinwalker Ranch, and I'm asking him, where did this come from? Where did this phenomena come from? The way that he put it, and this is almost exactly how I would put it, in again coming from that sort of Heiserite worldview. He said that when the people before the Ute came to that land, there were entities in the land that those people made a bargain with to learn how to do this skinwalker medicine, this bad medicine, this skinwalker magic. And that tradition that they learned is passed down to the Navajo as well. And the Navajo used it as a sort of an implement of warfare against the Ute. And he wasn't saying, he was like, you know, it's warfare, it's history. There's blood on both sides. He wasn't throwing all of the blame on the Navajo or anything. But yeah, that's exactly what I would think as well. And so if that's true, if there are sort of spirits of place that are being interacted with to achieve these kinds of effects, these kinds of results, it might depend on where geographically what those spirits are, right? Like the spirits that happen to inhabit that area of the southwestern United States might have a slightly different take on what the ritual is and what they manifest as than spirits say somewhere else. So I would think that they're related. It seems like related phenomena.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And see, then we kind of run into the same thing, this idea of an intersection between humanity and the supernatural, and then kind of landing somewhere in the middle. You know, if there are these older beings that predate, you know, human society. And this comes up a lot, and I'm hesitant to mention this sometimes because I feel like it's another thing that we tend to do. People tend to throw out like, oh, well, this is that, that's this. But, you know, if you do reading into the jinn of some Islamic belief systems, that's a really fascinating idea of these ancient beings that have been here a long, long time, you know, and they're dangerous. We can talk to them. Maybe we should, maybe we shouldn't. And then you also have, you know, the Fae folk and Fae folklore from other parts of the world. And that's also a similar thing where you have these unseen realms and these beings that can cross over. And I'm hesitant to lump everything together. I feel like some researchers and even myself, we tend to do that. We want to draw a direct line from A to B, but there are these commonalities that seem to come up. So.
Sure. Yeah, I think a good way to approach that within the guardrail, it's really like judging any truth claim, judging any reality. You've got to figure out what your baseline assumptions are going to be. Like no one can operate without what I would call a worldview. No one can operate without assuming something. For a long time, I mean, I think I won't get into that. I think everybody's got presuppositions. Everyone's got things that they assume are true about the world, just like in order to make the world intelligible to us. And I think like once you presuppose that thing, then you're going to encounter all of this stuff. And the question is, does my worldview, do these presuppositions make sense of all this body of data that I'm looking at? And so, of course, we're pattern recognizing creatures. We're going to point out patterns because they occur to us. It's one of the key ways that we survive, by recognizing patterns. So I think there's no sense in treating the world as if there are no patterns in it, or trying to treat the world as if it's just a brute fact with no connecting patterns, which is a common fault of like very materialistic, very scientific approach to the world tends to do that. But I think when you encounter, say, alien abduction phenomena that echoes almost exactly Fey abduction phenomena, there's no reason to say, well, because we have two different names for that now, now we've advanced beyond believing in Fey or fairies. Now we know the real deal. They're aliens from another planet because we have spaceships and they've got spaceships, and that makes it a lot more believable. Like it's similar to that chronological snobbery that I was
I was going to say that's kind of what you mentioned earlier. Like, yeah, because everyone that lived before us were idiots. Yeah.
They didn't know about spaceships. So when we see like lights in the sky, it's definitely spaceships. Yeah.
It's this topic is so confounding because you can ask a very simple question. Like Johnny asked a very straightforward, simple question. And here we are 10 minutes later, but I love it. I love it so much. We do have a interesting comment again from our friends at the West Coast Dogman Project. I think we need to make distinctions between werewolves, skinwalkers, and dogmen. The waters are muddy, but needs to be some clarification as best we can. I think that's an important point to make too, and kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier, because a lot of us, and I'm using the term us very broadly, but we'll look at, oh, everything falls under this, so all the skinwalkers are this, and then we get into the territory of like claiming indigenous lore as one thing. And I'm not saying I don't think that's what you've done here tonight, but I think that's an important point to make when we're talking about this stuff, is actually talk to people of native descent like Ward has done, and look at this stuff from that perspective instead of saying it's all one thing. And like, I have a hard time because there's a part of my brain that is 100% convinced that there is some kind of a subspecies of canine interbreeding different mixes or whatever that just happens to walk around on two legs now and again. But then it's like, okay, but what about all this other stuff, like what you've been talking about? And how likely is it that there are two things that look like this? It drives me insane. It literally keeps me up at night.
Yeah. I guess like I could easily make the distinction between, like, I get that the werewolf idea is the German idea passed down through folklore, possibly going back to Lycaon and his experience feeding what was it, Zeus, his own son, and being turned into a wolf. I mean, I think that if we wanted to talk about like werewolf as literary motif versus dogman as a thing that people are actually experiencing now, like I get that distinction. And Skinwalker being the particular kind of shamanic transformation that's done in that culture. I mean, there's definitely a distinction there. There's a reason there are three different terms. But what interests me, I think, is seeing patterns across multiple cultures, right? And the reason that it's interesting is because if I have an experience that is completely foreign to every other person in the world who's ever lived, that experience, it's difficult to make any sense of that, right? That's most likely a weird thing about me. If, however, I and a bunch of people in my culture have this experience enough to record it or depict it, or depict tales of it, or put it into our literary thought down over generations, and then other people in other cultures happen to have the same pattern of experience, like that seems to me like a more anchored thing, that pattern, the pattern that is repeated over many different things, is the more interesting thing to like tuck away in the back of your mind, to actually be more likely or more trustworthy when sort of operating through what we're doing, rather than a thing that might have only been experienced by one person or someone's unique perception of their event. Yeah. I don't know. Hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. Like to put it in a way that's simple for me, because I spend most of my time with a toddler. Like, there's a reason that it's been recorded and it is talked about by multiple people for multiple generations, and it's not because it's something that someone just on the fly, like, oh, let's try this. Like, you know, there's more to that. Am I getting that right?
Yeah.
Interesting stuff, man. This is what werewolves do to us. This is what dogmen do to us. Ugh. So we are at 40 minutes. My alarm did not go off on my phone, but I remembered we have a book to give away tonight. So we're going to dig a little bit into our werewolf dogman history. And there's a particular case. I need the city, the state, and the year. But there's a particular case wherein a man was struck by a dogman utilizing an implement. Not bitten or clawed, but actually struck with blunt force using an implement. First person to give me the city, state, and year in the chat will receive a hardcover copy of the Texas Dogman Triangle. So I'll be watching from this moment forward, and I'll ask again in a few minutes. I think Ward probably knows the one I'm talking about, but oh no, really?
No.
Okay.
Although that's really, I don't, but that's interesting with the, you know, that's interesting from my perspective.
Right? Like, and I picked that question. I've been thinking about this all day, and I just could not think of anything. And 10 minutes before we got on, I was like, that one. It's the only case I'm aware of wherein a dogman werewolf entity is purported to have used any kind of a tool. So it's pretty interesting.
Yeah, for
so
sure.
We'll watch the chat. Hopefully someone gets that, because I really want to give this book away. But okay. Couple more questions while we're waiting for that to come in. Alex Ventura asks a very interesting question, which I believe has multiple answers. When was Dogman first discovered in America? And I think that depends on, again, what we're talking about, because we started using the term Dogman about 20 years ago. Like Linda Godfrey really brought that into the light. But then, like, you know, we've had these stories and encounters and anecdotes that were around for 100 years or more before she started writing her books. But then we have these shamanic rituals and things. So what's your take on that, Ward? Where would you say, like, yeah, this is where it starts with this?
I don't know. I mean, based on the fact that like some of those relics that we have from Adina Hopewell era, and you know, historians date those as conservatively as possible, meaning as recently as they can, as recently as the evidence will allow. But that dating could be much more recent than in actuality. So what might have been 200 BC may be quite a bit older than that. So yeah, I mean, I think as long as we have any kind of recorded, not even recorded, as long as far back as we have archaeological evidence of people on the continent, we have stuff like that. We have that image of the man dog, the man wolf there.
Interesting. So it's, again, kind of one of those things. Yeah, it goes all around. Gosh. I have to be careful with this topic, because I can end up here for 3 hours chasing every little thing. Once again, that trivia question, I don't see the answer yet. But what is the city, state, and year? What is the case in which a dogman or werewolf is purported to have struck someone with an implement? I think it was I do remember. It was a piece of wood. So a dogman hit somebody with a piece of wood. City, state, year. I want you guys to learn something tonight if you haven't already. Another cool comment from Harvest Mary Moon, and I'm glad she brought this up because I was thinking about this earlier. Legend of the Wampus Cat, and that is an Appalachian legend of a woman that was turned into like a mountain lion. Have you run into that one before, Ward?
Not the woman turned into it aspect, but there is a very common, and in fact, there's a stone depiction of what is referred to as the water panther. That was, they believe, a Shawnee inscription or petroglyph that now lives at Tuende Way State Park in Point Pleasant, West Virginia, and it's a depiction of a cat with a tail that spirals in on itself. Right, so it's it's a whirlpool, and the reason they call it the Water Panther is because Point Pleasant, two rivers meet, and where they meet, the river appears to flow in both directions at one point, and then there's a whirlpool. And if you're familiar at all with like ancient cosmology, there's sort of a three-tiered reality in the ancient mind, and this is again a thing that is across many cultures. There's heaven, there's earth, and then there's waters under the earth, which relates to like you go into a cave, you're going into the earth, and you immediately find water. When people go into the water, they die, right? So like there's this idea of water being a portal to the underworld, and they associate the Water Panther and its whirlpool tail with passage to the underworld, where the Water Panther is meant to be like a guardian of passage to the underworld, to the Shawnee. So I'm familiar with that, and I remember discussing with the guys at the Sword and Staff podcast the possibility that the Wampus cat is like a manifestation of that thing. But no, I'm not familiar with the woman turning into the Water Panther, or the woman turning into the Wampus cat.
That was what I ran into when I was researching it, because it came up during the interview phase for this book. And I actually threw it in there as a mention, but yeah, the version I read is of this woman that put on the skin of a mountain lion and turned halfway into it. There's some versions where she has like 6 legs. It's very interesting. Very interesting. But then you made that link to, the Water Panther, and in Scottish folklore we have the Wolver, who is like an aquatic werewolf who's very good at fishing and swimming and is supposed to be very kind and benevolent. It's so, again, maybe these connections are artificial, maybe I'm just imagining it, but there's a lot that just keeps coming up. It's very recurring.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think water as portal to the underworld or portal to the unseen is like a very common motif.
Fascinating stuff, folks. Alrighty, so we've got about 3 minutes until 10 minutes. Wait, that was terrible. No, we're about 12 minutes from the top of the hour. I'm not seeing the answer to our trivia question yet, so I'm going to keep it on the screen here. City, state, and year. What Dogman case involves someone being struck by the monster with an implement, and it was a piece of wood? So somebody's going to be listening to this on the replay, like screaming at it. I know what it is. I actually did see the state in the comments here, so there's a piece of it, but that should be enough. OPR 357 says Paris, Michigan, 1937. That's not the one I was looking for, but doesn't mean that it's not correct. Paris, Michigan, 1937 Dogman. That's not actually the case I was looking for, but it is in here, so that's a win. That is a win. OPR 357 squad member has won a copy of the Texas Dogman Triangle hardcover. I was actually looking for the Defiance Werewolf, which is a Defiance, Ohio, 1972. But now we've got 2 of them. Totally forgot about this one. Awesome stuff, OPR. What'd you say?
I got to get your book. I didn't know that. But I'm right here.
Right, like I'll write 2 books on this, and all of a sudden I'm finding out new stuff. OPR 357, shoot an email to Aaron at smalltownmonsters.com. We'll get your shipping details. We'll get that sent out to you ASAP. Thank you so much. I'm so excited. We tried to do a giveaway of this book once before, and then a bunch of stuff happened, and it was like, hey, it's still here. Courtney was like, you can give this book away. I was like, okay. So Debbie Mustard asks, it's in the Dogman Triangle. It is not in the Dogman Triangle. No, the Dogman Triangle does not have any cases where dogmen are using tools that I am aware of. We do have a lot of roadkill sightings. So there's that. Let's see. We had a couple other comments in here. Well, speaking of Texas and the Dogman Triangle, our friend Michael Tovar from Austin heard another podcast that there were sightings or vocals heard off of Highway 29 in my area. Have you heard of any recent sightings? I might be familiar with the show or the report you're talking about, Michael. Ward, you were just in Austin. Did you run into any I'm not going to ask. That's a dumb question. Did you see any dogmen? But what did you think, based on the parts of that area that you saw? What do you think about this phenomena being present in the Austin area?
I don't know. I mean, we were mostly urban and suburban Austin, and I loved it. I mean, we were there before it gets hot, so that's kind of key. I have been in other parts of Texas. I've been in like rural outside El Paso, and I don't know if that's in the Triangle or not.
No, but there
there's
are a lot of border reports.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of there is a lot of country, and sparsely populated, and it's hard to tell both, just physically, it's hard to tell what might be out there. And also symbolically, it's a place at the edges, it's a place on the border. It's on the margins, which is where you get these bizarre chaos creatures, chimeric. So sort of looking at the landscape symbolically, I think, it makes sense. Texas is sort of frontiery in parts.
Yeah. And I actually got my highways mixed up. I'm going to blame being a stay-at-home parent. I blame everything on that these days. But Michael clarifies it's actually far west Texas, not Austin. So out there, bro, yeah, for sure. I see that.
That's real Texas. Real Texas.
Real Texas. Yeah. Well, even like parts of Austin, even the suburban areas in Texas, they're pretty closely flanked by a lot of woods and creeks and lakes and stuff. We have Bigfoot reports from rural San Antonio, but they're right next to some of our city parks that take up a couple hundred acres. So it's like, I don't know. I think they're there. I wrote a book about it, but oh man. Well, we're coming up at the top of the hour. I do want to give you a second word to just let us know what you're working on. Where can we follow you? Like, what's going on with Dark Holler Films? I didn't even talk to you about Dark Holler Films or ask you about that. Tell us about Dark Holler Films.
Yeah. So I was trying to avoid doing it, but I've broken down and sort of accepted. It's going to sound everything that I've said tonight is pretty woo. So I guess I can't.
I think this has been an incredibly fun conversation. I'm just going to say that, but no, please continue.
Yeah. So I've sort of accepted that it is a calling to work in this sphere and to tell stories about the strange occurrences that I think are going to become more frequent. And so my way of doing that, the production company that I'm going to use to make documentary films about this kind of stuff, make these adventure films and have strange experiences and document them and try to record them, is Dark Holler Studios. So the name of the paranormal docuseries that I made, and Studios, which is kind of where I got started with all of this. So yeah, you can follow. We have an Instagram that I barely check in on. I'm terrible at social media. At Dark Holler Studios. And then we have a website, darkhollerstudios.com. If you want to check out the paranormal series that kind of kicked all of this off and led to where I am now, darkhollerfilm.com. And then, the next thing to come out is with Merkle Media. We went to Washington State and we went to the site of Wes Germer of the Sasquatch Chronicles. We went to the site that he had his experience at. We heard his story. We spent some time out there and had some really bizarre experiences one night out there in the middle of Washington, like middle of nowhere, Washington, that are very strange. So those are coming out in a film called Sasquatch and the Missing Man, because there's a guy, it turns out, I don't want to spoil too much, but there are a lot of people that have disappeared up there as well. So, and it's very strange, but yeah, it's called Sasquatch and the Missing Man. That comes out May 5th on moment.co. We'll be premiering it there, and then it'll eventually come out on Amazon and all the other places too. So
nice. Well, and if you guys want to see some of Ward's other work in the Dogman universe, check out Werewolves Unearthed. It's on Amazon. It's on YouTube. If you're watching this on YouTube, you can check it out for free right now. And also the Bray Road Beast, which is the film we're supposed to be discussing tonight. Go watch that.
Yeah, it's actually it's really good. I was trying to talk Seth into letting me go do Bray Road Beast 2.
Dude,
this
it's
summer.
still an active area. There are still
I know.
reports coming out of there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and there are reports from multiple, like not just people that I know through or people that I've heard through Small Town Monsters, but I've heard reports now like second and third sources of people that are still having pretty crazy stuff go on in that area. The last thing I wanted to drop before we just started a podcast called the Ohio, called the Ohio How. It's pretty irregular, but this is our this is like me and a buddy here locally kind of reviewing these wild adventures that we go on. There's some behind the scenes stories and then speculating on how we make sense of these experiences. So we're actually going out to do like a field episode Friday with a guy that in the 60s witnessed a dog man in this Northeast Ohio near Cleveland. And then we're going to try and spend some time there at night with some monitoring tools and just see what happens. So that'll be an interesting podcast episode experiment.
Dude, yes. I'm excited. We'll have links to all this stuff in the show notes when this goes on the podcasters later. So we'll make sure everybody can find all that stuff. But yeah, man, if you can sell Seth on Bray Road 2, I'm in. I'm going. Try and keep me off that shoot. Like,
yeah. Let's do it. Let's have, you'll be like the explorer and I'll shoot it. It'll be cool.
I was just thinking today, I ran that short clip at the beginning where they're talking about Bray Road and how you can't just wander up and start, messing with it because it's a place where people live. And I was like, man, unless we film something there in the future, I might never get to actually go check it out in detail. So
yeah,
I'm in, but
we should definitely do it.
Oh, it'd be fun. Well, dude, thank you so much for joining me, man. I've been looking forward to hanging out with you. I'm sure we'll have an excuse to do this again. So
yeah, for sure. I can't wait to get back down to Texas and maybe go hunt some stuff.
Heck yeah, man. There's too many places we can check out. I'm sure some of our friends in the audience could point us towards a couple more. But well, folks, thank you so much for tuning in. Please come back next Monday for our next show. We're gonna tweak the schedule a little bit next week due to scheduling stuff. So hit us up Monday for our next episode. We will be back on Bigfoot. I can tell you that, but I don't want to spoil anything else. So good night, everybody. Thank you so much. And Ward, thank you once again.
Dude, thank you, Aaron. Thank you, everybody. It was cool.